guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be an October wrap-up. I did not really read that much in the month of October, but I did read more than I did in like August and September, so I guess we're gonna count it as a win. Mostly I read ebooks and audiobooks. It was a really like physical book light month for me. So I started out the month literally on like the first day. It might actually have started in September. That's how long it has taken me to read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. My ring light is reflecting off of the cover. There we go. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I have been switching between the ebook and the audiobook of this for well over a month, and not because it was not good to me, but because I genuinely was like trying to soak in every moment of it. You follow several main characters. You follow Dalinar, Kaladin, Shallan, and Adolin. You follow this Alethi kingdom that is in a war with the Parshendi because the Parshendi assassinated their king, and so they've been warring for the last 6 years, and they're fighting this war on what is called the Shattered Plains, which is like a series of plateaus that you need bridges to be able to cross, and they're trying to wage this war, winning these things called gem hearts, and essentially whoever gets the gem heart wins that battle on that particular day. Dalinar and Adolin are very much involved in the Alethi side of this battle. Those two are called Bright Lords. In the Way of Kings world, if you have light eyes, you are considered a part of the nobility, whereas if you have dark eyes, you are considered a commoner, I guess. So those two are light-eyed, they are very close to the king, and they are trying to figure out if there's any way to end this war differently. You also follow Kaladin, who was once a soldier for one of these Bright Lords, but he has become a slave, and he becomes a member of what is known as Bridge 4, which is a group of bridgemen that are running straight into battle with no shields, carrying a bridge so that the soldiers can cross from plateau to plateau to get to the battles. You're also following Shallan, who is a light-eyed noblewoman, and she is trying to become a ward of the most sought-after scholar in the entire kingdom, whose name is Jasna. She is the king's daughter, and as her ward, Shallan would get to study under her and also become a scholar and learn, but you learn that Shallan is not just trying to become her ward, she is also trying to steal from her. That was really lengthy, and I realized that I'm going to have to do that entire synopsis again when I do my dedicated review for this book, so I'm going to try and repeat that one more time when I get there. But this was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved it. I just finished it the other day, and I can't wait to move on to Words of Radiance. The next book that I started and then I finished rather quickly in the month of October was Battleground by Jim Butcher. This is the latest in the Dresden Files series as you follow Harry towards the end of his journey, I guess. I mean, it's like book 17 or 18. I think there's supposed to be like 23 of them, so I guess we're really not that close to the end. This is the second half of what was to have been one book with peace talks. They were released like 2 months apart, and Battleground just kind of follows the events of peace talks. I really don't want to give up anything because it's super, super spoilery, so, you're still following Harry Dresden in his adventures in Chicago. I ended up giving Battleground 3 stars. I think I gave Peace Talks 4. It probably would have been like a 4.5, honestly. Peace Talks was a lot higher in my estimation. I know that a lot of people like Battleground more, but Battleground honestly reminds me of the entire third Hobbit movie. It's just one long, large battle scene, and lots of stuff happens in that battle, but I don't feel that all of it was really necessary, and that's kind of my feelings on the third Hobbit movie. So, it is what it is. I do not like some of the choices that Jim Butcher made with some of the characters. Other characters really came through, and I loved what he did with them, but this book hurt me, and it hurt me deeply, and I just don't know. I mean, I'm going to keep reading the series because I've stuck with it this long, but this one was a huge disappointment to me, honestly. The next book that I read was The Night Swim by Megan Golden. This book follows a woman who owns a podcast, or who runs a podcast that follows big trials around the country. What she does is she listens to the evidence from the trial and she puts it into her podcast, and she lets the listeners decide whether they would have chosen to convict or not convict the person on trial. In this particular book, she is following a rape case. This is the first time she has ever done so. Usually she sticks to murders, and I think actually usually she doesn't listen to the events of the trial live. It's kind of like an after it happens sort of thing, but she is actually sitting in on this trial, listening to all of the evidence as it's presented and giving it to her viewers the day that it is presented in court even, so that they can listen to this case as it unfolds. And the rape case follows a girl who is accused, a very prominent member of the community. He's the town's golden boy. He's the swimmer at the local college that's supposed to go to the Olympics. She's accused him of sexually assaulting her, and the main character is following these events. At the same time, she's received a letter, or a series of letters, mysteriously delivered to her car about a different rape and a different death that has happened, I think 20 years previously. The writer is the person who died's sister, and she is asking the main character to please investigate her sister's death. She thinks that her sister did not accidentally drown, but was actually murdered, and wants this to come to light. So you're following both of these cases throughout the entire story. It's really fascinating because you hear the podcast element as well. I listened to this on audiobook, by the way, and the podcast part of it was so cool to listen to. But you're also listening to moments from the previous case from the sister's point of view, and you kind of see what's going on as it happens, and then the ending was not the most revolutionary ending in a thriller that I have ever listened to, but it was still very good. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. The audiobook was fantastic. The only thing that I really have against it is that the ending was kind of predictable, and the events of the past were also kind of predictable. I will give trigger warnings. There is a lot of talk of sexual assault, obviously, and even in the parts that happen in the past, it's actually incredibly graphic, because you see some of the things that are happening to the sister before she dies, and you hear it from the eyes of a child that is watching her sister go through all of this. It's really hard to listen to, honestly. I would definitely give a trigger warning for all of that, as well as there's like a brief talk of like child sexual assault, like hinting that somebody would want to do that, and so that was a little disturbing as well. So trigger warnings for all of that. But overall, I did really enjoy it, and like I said, I gave it 4 stars. The next book is kind of hard for me to talk about in this manner, but it is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I'm just gonna say right off the bat, I gave this 2 stars. I really didn't like it. It took me forever to read it, both on ebook and audiobook. I think the only reason that I finished it is because of the audiobook, honestly. When I hear Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, I think that I'm going to get some kind of Steel Magnolias meets Buffy. But there were not multiple vampires. There was one vampire, and I'm not necessarily sure I could even call him a vampire. He kind of sounded like some random monster from Supernatural. And they talk about him, like, infiltrating their book club. I don't really think that that's what happened. I didn't like... The title was misleading. The reviews that I've seen on BookTube about this have been misleading, and I think it's mostly from people that haven't read it yet that are hearing the same things that I've been hearing. I know some people like it, and I know that technically this is considered horror, so maybe that's why. Maybe horror is just not my thing. But I don't see enough trigger warnings talked about for this book, because there was some really graphic descriptions of sexual assault and the aftermath of sexual assault. There was sexual assault on a teenager that was also pretty graphic, and I heard none of this beforehand. And I get that it's horror. I get that you should look up trigger warnings beforehand, and these are not things that trigger me specifically, but they did shock me as I was listening to the audiobook, where I just sat there going, what the hell is happening? What am I listening to right now? Yeah, I was underwhelmed as a whole. I did not like it. I know there are people that do really enjoy it, and that is entirely their right. But this was not for me. The next book that I read was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This is about a girl who is a nanny for a very rich family that kind of lives in like a smart house. She moves there and moves in with this family to take care of their kids, but immediately like that night, as soon as she moves there, I'm pretty sure they have to leave to go like for a work conference or something, and so she is left alone with these 3 children, 3 girls, trying to flounder around and take care of them when she has had 0 preparation. She's just been hired. So you kind of follow her. There's kind of like a supernatural element-ish You think there's a supernatural element, you don't really know if it's actually there or not. She hears things, she thinks something's watching her, the house is haunted, whatever, and you know in the beginning, from the very beginning of the book, that it's all taking place from the point of view of the nanny who has already been arrested because one of these girls has died. So you know that going in, and she's telling all of this to somebody she's trying to hire to be her lawyer to get out of jail. So you hear the story entirely from her point of view, so it's obviously she's not a trustworthy narrator, and it's really interesting and both creepy seeing all of these events unfold as she's telling it to you. The events, it's based loosely, I think, on the turn of the screw, and if I had read that, I probably would have guessed the ending. But I had not, and so the ending blew my mind, and I'm pretty sure I just sat there for a solid, 30 seconds after I, finished listening to the audiobook, just going, what just happened? It got 5 stars from me. It was really, really, really good, and kind of sad, in all honesty. I know that this is a lot of people's favorite Ruth Ware book, so I'm interested in seeing some of her other ones, and maybe I'll start getting more into thrillers. The next book that I read was Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. Again, another Brandon Sanderson book, I know. This is the second book in Mistborn Era 2, which follows Wax and Wayne, who are 2 very cowboy-like characters in a industrial revolution era of the Mistborn world. So you see things like trains and guns and whatnot and cowboys. It's like Mistborn as a Western. The events of the first Mistborn Era 2 book continues, so you see them as they investigate another crime with a lot of the same characters that were in the first one. I don't really want to give too much away to spoil it, so I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I really, really liked it. I just didn't like it as much as I liked the previous book. It kind of dragged a little bit in some places for me, but I did really enjoy it, and I can't wait to move on to book 3. Final book that I read in October was Druid Volume 1 by Curtis Weba and Justin Osterling. This was an arc that I got off of NetGalley. I believe this is released sometime next year. I'll have to check on that for sure. But essentially, it's kind of saga meets, I don't know, like a typical sword and sorcery kind of novel. I don't really have another comparison, but it's like saga if more magic was there. You follow Morgan and Yale Glass, who are the two adult main characters, as they move to this idyllic little town in the middle of the woods, it looks like, with their 2 twins, Griffin and Rana. You don't really know what they're running from, but you see them clearly running away from something. You don't really know what they're running to, but now all of a sudden you flash forward 10 or 12 years or so. Twins are more grown up, and all of a sudden their little town is attacked by what kind of looks like droids. I don't really want to give too much more away to spoil it, but this was a really great graphic novel. Everything is really fast-paced from the very beginning, and I would hesitate to say that sometimes it's actually a little bit too fast-paced. The art style is really, really beautiful, but a couple of times during the fight scenes, it just got a little bit confusing. You couldn't really follow everything as well. Other than that, I have absolutely no issues with any of the story. I really want Volume 2 to be released so that I can see what happens next, because you find out that they were hiding some secrets, and you find out a little bit about what they were running from, but not enough about what they were running from to answer any of your questions. So I need those answered, and I hope that we will get Volume 2 shortly. I ended up giving it, I think, 4 stars, and I really enjoyed reading it. It was one of the most interesting graphic novels that I think that I've read. Alright guys, so that was my October wrap-up. Let me know if you've read any of these down below. Let me know if you liked or didn't like or agree with my opinions or whatever. I would love to talk about it with you in the comments, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye!